So my journey to adoption began around January of 2019, and the steps that I took to become an adoptive placement or adoptive license was that I contacted the Department of Family and Protective Services. I found out when they were having their orientations, and I attended one of their orientations. At that point, they provided a list of probably hundreds of agencies in the area that I could be licensed with and take trainings with so that I can get my license to adopt. So I took that list and went through the list and decided to go with an agency that's here in Houston. And the agency was very responsive, very quick to respond to wanting to recruit or start getting the trainings done. That was good for me because I was wanting to get licensed as quickly as possible. So that took approximately probably 6 months to complete. The training took about 6 months to complete, which also included the home study and all of the things that are necessary in order to be licensed with the state to adopt. And so from July probably till maybe November, I was looking through the TARE website. It's a TARE website where there is just a large amount of children on the website available for adoption. They're free to be adopted. And so I began my journey in reading a little bit about the profiles of the children. My goal was only to adopt one child, as I already had 2 adult children and several grandchildren by this point. I was really just wanting to provide a single child with a home where they would have undivided attention and to be able to be given the opportunities and the resources they needed to thrive and to have some normalcy in their life. So I probably had about 15 or 20 or more children that I was interested in learning more about. And unfortunately at that time, the person who was assigned to that child or caseworker, I'm not sure what they were, they really weren't very responsive. And so that was unusual to me because it just wasn't my understanding that these children needed a home and that they needed to be placed as soon as possible. Especially after looking at their profile, a lot of these children had been in care since 5, 6 years, 3 years, 4 years, just in foster care. That was a bit interesting for me, since I was just under the assumption that all people wanted to adopt children, and having such a vast majority of choices on this website, I thought for sure there wouldn't be very many. Well, long story short, my agency was helping me and contacting these caseworkers that never returned my calls or my requests for more information. That's unfortunate. However, there was an event that took place, I believe it was sometime in October or November, where the foster children could go and play, and they got bouncy houses and things like that. And you can interact with the children there to see who you think might be most compatible for your family. And so I did that. I went there and I looked at they give you a binder, and they've got the profiles of all the children there, and they give you information about them, right? And so I had an interest in probably 2 or 3 that I had met with their caseworkers and narrowed it down to 1. And so when we narrowed it down to 1, the caseworker seemed very she seemed very excited that there could be a possible match for me to adopt this child. So we started the adoption process in terms of what that looks like. Well, you have to submit like a life book of your, like a photo book of your life that kind of shares a little bit about what your family structure is like, and just the details of your employment and things, very, very personal information. Of course, they review your home study as well. They look over that, and then they get to decide, okay, this is important for foster children, right? To understand the process at this point. Then they get to decide if they want you to be that child's family. It's not based on whether or not you could provide a safe and stable home. It's not based on whether or not maybe they think that you've had probably a questionable history. It seems like it's just based on, from my understanding, it's the CPS caseworker, it's the child's CASA worker. So there's like a group of people that have a meeting, and they review all the applications that are submitted and requesting that child be adopted. And so these people that are CASAs and caseworkers, they get full control over whether or not who adopts you and if you get to be adopted at all. Unfortunately, we see that the consequences of those policies and procedures have still continued to leave many children without homes for a lot of years. And that's unfortunate, and it's very sad. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a context in that regard. And so I was selected. I was selected to move forward with the adoption process of this child. And that process consisted of them giving me a whole lot of information about this child and medical records and all of their history, right? And so in my case with this placement, the child was 9 years old. He had been in care since he was 6 years old, and I was probably his 10th placement. Out of those placements, he was probably 3 of those placements were residential treatment centers. So I was informed at that time that he was specialized need, and well, being a first-time adoptive parent, I just thought, okay, what does that mean? Well, it just means they have a lot of behaviors, they're challenging. Well, having 2 adult children, I was just assuming normal, everyday, challenging behaviors that kids have. So I was left with that impression that, you know, they're just having some behavior issues. They might need to be in special classroom settings, and that's fine. They might need medication, that's also fine. Again, this was my first time adopting. I really didn't understand exactly what all these things meant in terms of the level of care the child would need once they came home. And it's not really the child would need care, the child would need supervision. So that's, and in a very structured and rigorous schedule. They need to have constant routine and consistency and predictability in their daily routine. So being a full-time employee and a single parent, I thought it would be good. I thought it would be all right, being that I worked at a school district. I'd had a lot of holidays off, and I was looking forward to just this opportunity. Well, the child was placed, I want to say probably at the end of December, maybe early January. And during that time, the child was having a lot of It seemed to be severe side effects to some kind of a psychotropic medication. I'm guessing that some of you that are foster children that might be watching this video kind of understand that there are some uncomfortable side effects that are associated with taking these psychotropic medications. This child in particular was taking 4 psychotropic medications and had some severe side effects that I felt needed some medical attention. But that wasn't until probably 2 weeks or so into the placement. Prior to that, my foster son had been experiencing some distress here at home. He was having trouble just getting settled in and adjusting to the new home and the routines. And then he was also having trouble at school with bullying, is what he said, and he was not being safe in regard to hurting other children at school, eloping from the school, just doing a lot of unsafe behaviors. And so unfortunately, as time went on, I had him to see his psychiatrist due to some concerns about the medication. At that point, the psychiatrist chose and opted to take him off of all 4 of the medications, because the fact that the side effects were severe enough to where they could potentially be life-threatening. The psychiatrist didn't really know which one of the medications were causing the symptoms, so the plan of action was for this foster son of mine, or adoptive son of mine, to be removed from all of his medication and then resume back in 2 weeks, adding slowly 1 medication at a time to see which of the medications were the ones that were causing these problems. Now I want to stop right there, because as a new person in the system, one of the things that I was not requesting during these office visits were the doctor's notes and the doctor's diagnoses and the doctor's next plan of action. Let me encourage you to make sure that you get a copy of the diagnoses and what the plan of action is in writing, because what happened to me was is that I'm going to tell you the rest of the story, but let me be very clear. Do not leave the psychiatric office or hospital unless you have the discharge paperwork from that office visit and clearly stating what the directions are in regards to medication, if it will be discontinued, if it will be continued, or if it will be increased. Because if you don't have any documentation from this provider, you could very well wind up with a lot of problems. That being said, we took the child off of the medications, and of course the behaviors were still unsafe. They were even greater. So he continued to have some self-harming behavior at that point. And in one instance, he tried to run away and jumped off of my 2nd story patio. Yes, in an attempt to run away. He was very distressed, and he didn't know how to process his emotions, and he still had not been able to adjust. And that was very traumatic, because it was my intentions to provide a safe and loving home for this child, and for me to see him climb over the railing and literally jump was traumatic for me, to say the least. I am thankful that he didn't have any injuries. He just continued to run. At that point, of course, I made my efforts to follow him, to retrieve him. I contacted the adoption foster agency caseworker, informing them of all of the challenges that were going on on a very regular basis. I contacted the CPS caseworker, informing them as well of all these challenging behaviors. Usually these behaviors were on weekends, so Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and I didn't get any help. And that was very discouraging, and also left with a feeling of helplessness as to how to help this child. It was as if they just dropped the child off and said, goodbye, have a nice life. And so throughout these challenges, I continued to email caseworker, letting them know step by step, day by day, hey, this child is experiencing a lot of concerns and unsafe behaviors. They wouldn't come. And this case was specifically out of Montgomery County. Yeah, so I'm in Harris County. So long story short, we continued to make efforts to let him go to school and have a general classroom setting, and to see if he can adjust to normalcy. But what happened was that one day he got on his bike and literally just rode away. It was scary, it was traumatic. I felt very scared for the safety of this child. I called the police, I contacted the caseworker, I contacted the CPS worker, I contacted the CASA worker and let everyone know the child is missing, he's run away. Well, it was quite a bit, because throughout this few weeks, these are only a few weeks, the child had been abusive and assaultive towards me, verbally abusive, assaulting me. So just because he didn't want to like go to bed or normal things like that. It was really heartbreaking for me to see a child in such distress, right, and not be able to help them. So I drove around the neighborhood all over the place trying to find him, and thankfully I did, and I was on the phone with the police and let them know the child is on this street, I'm not going to approach him. And so I just didn't want to aggravate the situation. So the police apprehended him, put him in the back of their vehicle, and he was just unbelievably unable to remain controlled. He was kicking the windows of the police officer's vehicle, and just was not in any way, shape, or form able to come back home and stay safe. At that point, the police department decided to place the child in an emergency room hospital to see if they can get him regulated, at least calm, until a bed or room would come available in a psychiatric hospital for him. Now at this point, no one still has come. No CPS caseworker, no foster care agency, no one. It was the CASA worker who did actually drive from Montgomery County to Harris County to be at the hospital with this child. Unfortunately, it wasn't CPS or anyone else. And this CASA worker sat with me and just discussed some of the concerns we were having and the behaviors and how very challenging and very stressful those situations were. At that point, I was told that the child would be placed in a psychiatric hospital and that I would need to bring some clothing and things like that for him, which I did. I went to visit him at the hospital, went through visiting hours, brought him the clothes that he needed. And I was very much looking forward to him returning after he would be able to be stabilized. But at that point, without CPS ever coming to my home, without the foster care agency or adoptive placement agency ever coming to my home, they didn't even come and do the placement paperwork with me. At least the foster care agency did not. So, still been waiting for that. So on February 14th, mind you, only 6 weeks later, it was decided that by the CPS adoption caseworker that this child would no longer return to my home, which at that point I was distraught. I was completely distraught. After all the efforts that I had made to accommodate and to bring this child into my home, and there just was not any resources or support provided. It's unfortunate though, because as a result of that, the foster care agency just called me maybe once or twice and then just closed my home. They didn't tell me why. They did not further wish to engage in solutions on how this child could have permanency in my home. And that was unfortunately. But however, I will say that in the beginning I wasn't familiar with the terms of discipline. So in my regard, I was thinking, what can we do for discipline to see if we can help that behaviors? I was very limited in my ability to regulate a specialized needs child. And being just a traditional parent, I just thought, well, you'll just discipline either with like maybe a spanking, or maybe you'll have to go to your room, and just normal things that biological children probably face on a regular basis. And so these questions about whether or not how I could discipline the child came up, in that they were saying, no, you're not allowed to, restrain the child, you're not allowed to discipline the child, you're not allowed to do anything basically to implement any type of structure outside of, they didn't really give me any information at that time. I was not equipped. And that's very sad, because I would have liked to have been. And so the child was put in a psychiatric hospital where I refused medical restraint due to the fact that on one of my phone calls with the child, he had informed me that he had been given a shot, and that the shot made him dizzy and it made him fall and hit his head. Well, no one was supervising him at that psychiatric hospital. So when I went to see him, he did have like a bump on his head, and it was very upsetting to me because of the fact that not that he had been given the medication to calm him, but that he was not being supervised to keep him safe. And so that was very upsetting to me, and it was very, very hard on me to see this child being treated like, I don't even say close to being human. And during this time that the child was in the hospital, I did challenge the CPS adoption worker as to what would be the best option in terms of how we can get this child stable outside of just drugging him up, right? Because that's their answer to everything, is drugs. Give them drugs, drugs, and more drugs. That's what I had noticed in just the few weeks that I had been privileged to have this opportunity to experience this adoption placement. So unfortunately, the CPS caseworker did not even come to even pick up the things of the child. Again, I feel this is a really huge and disappointing situation on how you treat the people who are in the community that are trying to serve and be helpful. To not come to my home, to not come and make efforts to do formal paperwork to discharge the child, that's nauseating, for lack of a better word. And so that was not well. That was not good. But what did happen was that a CASA did come out, and I was able to give a punch list of all the things that were in the boxes that I had packed for the child, and the things were taken, and I didn't see the child again. I was hoping that I would be able to make some efforts, right, to get the child back, knowing that the needs of this child were very high needs in terms of how much supervision they were needing. That foster care agency did not have the resources to give me proper training in terms of how to do sitting basket holds or PAPH holds, things that would be helpful in regulating the child. So that was not a good experience for me. So what happened was I wanted to make an effort to try to get the child back in my home. So I started looking for another adoption or foster agency that would license me, but that had 24-hour a day, 7-day a week crisis response care. And that's what I knew that I needed for this child, because I needed someone to come and help me and show me so that I can learn how to also implement these techniques. Well, I came across another agent. This agency was local. They were just opening up, and they seemed like a very promising and very committed agency in making sure that there would be no discharges from the home. That was very encouraging to me. And they also offered this, like I said, this intense training, very good training on how to prepare you mentally, psychologically, emotionally for children that are placed in your home. The fact that they offer the 24/7 crisis response was a plus. And I thought, well, once I get licensed with this agency, my thoughts were that I would take my certification and try again with the child that had been removed from my care, to show CPS, look, these are all the extra things that I've done to be able to adequately provide this additional care needed, right? So I was willing to go the extra mile, let's say, and took me probably 5 months. It took me 5 months because I had already had some training. It took me 5 months to get certified with this other agency here. I was really excited about it. So in July of 2020, I was officially licensed to foster, adopt, and taxes.